Hey, welcome back. Here we are with Hamlet Act 5. We're finally getting towards the end of this play, and things are going to get interesting. This is, of course, the denouement, where everything is going to come undone for our heroes. And as it is also a tragedy, we can kind of expect everything to fall apart, but for the heroes to gain some sense of self-awareness before the final thing ends. So that's what we're looking for. Hamlet, after all, has failed again and again and again to really accomplish his purpose of avenging his father and defeating King Claudius. And most recently, he was sent off to England, but then did that whole pirate ship escape thing? Act 5 begins in a graveyard, which is an interesting and appropriate setting for this book. Throughout this book, we've seen many of the characters discuss ideas of how to deal with grief. Hamlet himself has had several soliloquies in which he struggles with his depression, he struggles with his ideas of death and what death means, but time has gone by, and we might argue that Hamlet's ideas have developed some since the beginning. Hamlet's certainly still thinking about death, but his ideas may have changed a bit. We begin with a fairly comic conversation between two clowns, who are also gravediggers. They serve the point of comic relief here, and their argument is over whether the person who's supposed to be buried here should be buried here or not. She did, after all, drown herself willingly. We assume they're talking about Ophelia, and the debate is whether a person who has committed suicide can have a Christian burial. It was illegal during this particular time period, and yet they're still burying her in a Christian graveyard. The humor comes from the simplicity of their methods of arguing. Ultimately, one of the gravediggers heads off, and the other one stays to continue working. At this point, Hamlet and Horatio walk in. Horatio has apparently just picked Hamlet up from his return and redeemed him from the pirates. And as they walk through the graveyard, Hamlet notices this gravedigger who's happily singing as he's tossing bones about. Has this fellow no feeling of his business that he sings at grave making? Horatio says, well, he's probably used to it. Hamlet is sort of awed with this flippancy around death and around bodies. That skull had a tongue in it and could sing once. How the knave jowls it to the ground as if it were Cain's jawbone that did the first murder. It might be the pate of a politician, which his ass gnaw or reaches. One that would circumvent God, might it not? The guy is tossing them around like toys, and yet these used to be fancy, important people probably. And when Hamlet asks the gravedigger whose grave it is, the gravedigger takes everything Hamlet says excessively literally, which makes for an interesting little conversation and a bit of confusion. The gravedigger won't say it's for a person because the person is dead, therefore the body is an object and no longer a person. Hamlet is somewhat amused by the over-literal gravedigger, and he begins to ask him about his trade of gravedigging. How long will a man lie in the earth ere he rot? Faith, if he be not rotted before he die, as we have many pocky corpses nowadays that will scarce hold the laying in, he will last you some 8 or 9 year. A tanner will last you a 9 year. In the middle of this, the gravedigger pulls up a skull and says, take this guy for an example. He's been in the earth some 23 years. And Hamlet, of course, can't recognize it from the skull, but the gravedigger tells him that it was Yorick, the king's jester. And this causes Hamlet pause because he knew this guy. This is where I do a little math and figure out Hamlet's age. If this body has been in the ground for 23 years and Hamlet knew him well, then Hamlet had to at least have been 6 or so to be able to recognize this fellow. This man was part of the royal court. This is somebody that Hamlet knew when he was a child. He used to play with this man. And so he picks up the skull, and we have that iconic image of Hamlet holding a skull that everyone recognizes so well. Alas, poor Yorick! I knew him, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest, of most excellent fancy. He hath borne me on his back 1,000 times. And now, how abhorred in my imagination it is! My gorge rises at it. Here hung those lips that I have kissed I know not how oft. Where are your jibes now? Your gambols, your songs, your flashes of merriment that were wont to set at the table on a roar? Not one now, to mock your own grinning. Quite chapfallen. Now get you to my lady's chamber and tell her, let her paint an inch thick. To this favor she must come. Make her laugh at that. Prithee, Horatio, tell me one thing. Dost thou think Alexander looked of this fashion in the earth? This, for Hamlet, is another personal connection to death. Here he sees someone that he knew as a child, someone who was a very specific part of his childish memory, who is now simply a skull that he can hold in his hand. Death comes for everyone, and it's something that must be accepted. Is it possible that at this point, Hamlet has finally learned to begin to move on from death? He's never gotten around to resolving the problem that came from his father's death, but he seems to understand a bit more that death is inevitable and it's part of us all. He was told that at the beginning of the play, but it's not till now that it really seems to be fully sinking in with him. We all turn to dust. Alexander the Great, in spite of all of his actions, ultimately became a pile of dust. The great Caesars, the great heroes of old, they all return to the same place. But Hamlet's thoughts are interrupted as the scene shifts. The funeral procession arrives, and here is death again as something distinctly personal, not from the distant past, but something right now, and powerful and relevant and significant to Hamlet. It is the death of his girlfriend, Ophelia. And Hamlet at first doesn't want to be seen. He and Horatio stand back where no one can see them. And here arrives the procession, and they are burying Ophelia. Laertes is broken. And the priest refuses to do a whole lot of extra stuff for Ophelia. They are allowing her to be buried a Christian burial in spite of her suicide, but because it was kind of questionable. But they're not going to go ahead and do anything else. Laertes is very angry at the priest for this. Lay her in the earth, and from her fair and unpolluted flesh may violets spring. I tell thee, churlish priest, a ministering angel shall my sister be while thou liest howling. And this is the point at which Hamlet realizes the person they're burying is actually Ophelia. And Laertes can't take it anymore. He jumps in the grave with Ophelia and starts shouting, "Bury me alive with her!" And at this point, Hamlet can't take it anymore, but rushes out of hiding and jumps in the tomb as well. And he says, "You're crying for your sister? Well, I'm gonna cry for her even harder." And they start attacking each other and wrestling and fighting in the tomb. What? After a moment, the servants drag them apart, but Hamlet's saying, "I loved Ophelia. 40,000 brothers could not with all their quantity of love make up my sum. What wilt thou do for her? Show me what thou do. Would weep, would fight, would fast, would tear thyself, would drink up easel, would eat a crocodile. I'll do it! Dost thou come here to whine, to outface me with leaping in her grave, be buried quick with her, and so will I! You can't mourn for her better than I can!" So you gotta feel sorry for Laertes here, who just lost his sister, and then his sister's crazy boyfriend runs up and starts ranting and raving about how he loved her more than you did. This could potentially be a good case for Hamlet's madness. Is he acting this? Did he really love her that much? Why is he so intent on angering Laertes here? If he really loved her so much and wants to show it so much, why didn't he show it more in life? Hamlet gets pulled away, and the king calms Laertes down by reminding him of the plot the two of them have together. And so we come to the end of scene 1 and move on to scene 2, the big grand finale. If this weren't the last scene of the play, we would be wondering when Hamlet is ever going to get around to taking care of Claudius. He doesn't seem any more inclined at this moment than he ever has in the play. What's it gonna take to get Hamlet to actually take care of Claudius? We open this scene with Hamlet and Horatio talking, and Hamlet is telling the story of what happened on the boat. He's already told about the whole pirate thing, but now he's telling about the letter. And so he talks about how in the middle of the night he woke up and decided to go down and, check things out. Take a peek at exactly what was going on, rashly. And praised be rashness for it, let us know. Our indiscretion sometimes serves us well, when our deep plots do pall, and that should learn us there's a divinity that shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will. Yeah, I just couldn't sleep, and I decided to go down and check things out, and I know I was being a little rash here, but it turned out for the best. And he says these lines, "There's a divinity that shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will." It was divine providence or divine will that led me to this particular moment, he says. No matter how I rough hew my life, so I just kind of hack away at my life, trying to make something of it, and it's not coming out in the right shape, then there's a divine will, there's a higher power that kind of forms me and pushes me where I need to go. It's the idea that Hamlet isn't completely responsible for his actions. So to some extent, maybe he is shrugging off the fact that he's never been able to fully get things where he needs to go. There's a play between free will and fate here. Maybe we have a will, but our will only shapes things roughly, and fate kind of finishes the product. In any case, he snuck into Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's room, picked through their bag, found the letter, snuck back to his own room and opened it up. And lo and behold, it says, as soon as you arrive, kill Hamlet. Hamlet was like, no, I don't think so. And so he pulls out his own letter and writes it all in his fancy script, saying thank you to his old teachers who taught him all that fancy kind of writing, legalese. And he sealed it with a royal signet that he had and tucked it back in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's bag. However, instead of saying please kill Hamlet upon receipt of this letter, it now says please kill Rosencrantz and Guildenstern upon receipt of this letter. And then there was a pirate attack and Hamlet got off the boat. Horatio says, so Guildenstern and Rosencrantz go to it? And Hamlet replies, why man, they did make love to this employment. They are not near my conscience. Their defeat does by their own insinuation grow. 'Tis dangerous when the baser nature comes between the pass and fell incense points of mighty opposites. It's their own fault in meddling with what they couldn't handle. Get involved with Claudius, get involved with me, things are just gonna go rough for you. This is pretty cold on Hamlet's part. Now, we've noticed early on that Hamlet really has been incapable of action. He's been unable to do anything about Claudius. He's been unable to fight Claudius, unable to do the ghost's bidding. And yet, he's now murdered 3 other people. He killed Polonius behind a curtain. He kills Rosencrantz and Guildenstern indirectly here. How is it that he can't bring himself to kill Claudius, and yet he's slaughtering people left and right otherwise? There are probably several aspects to this particular question, but one of them is the fact that he has killed none of them face to face. Polonius, he stabbed through a curtain. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, he killed with a letter. I think it's worth noting that it's a lot easier to face your problems indirectly rather than directly. It's hard to stand up to someone face to face and confront them, but it's much easier to do it subtly and behind that person's back. It's one of the reasons why cyberbullying is such a big issue in our world today. All the people who say mean comments on my videos, I'm sure you would have a harder time doing it if you were staring me in the face. People who bully and drive people to suicide through social media, it's a tragedy and an epidemic, and it stems from cowardice, not from coolness or bravery. We could also say that perhaps it's Claudius himself that Hamlet has trouble killing. Hamlet can dabble all day in all kinds of problems in his world, but he can't face the one center problem, because that would require him to face who he truly is. Why? It's a point worth pondering, and there's probably several answers to it. I'll let you reflect and mull it over. In any case, Hamlet rather brutally allows Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to die for being dumb and being involved in Claudius and his affairs. Horatio is still shocked that the king ordered Hamlet's death, and Hamlet says, does it not, thinkest thee, stand me now upon, he hath killed my king, and whored my mother, popped in between the election and my hopes, thrown out his angle for my proper life, and with such cozenage? Is it not perfect conscience to quit him with this arm? And is it not to be damned to let this canker of our nature come in eat further evil? In other words, it's about time to finally kill this guy. He's done everything bad I could possibly think of, and now I have plenty of reasons to kill him, as if I didn't all the way back in Act 1. He's killed my dad, he's married my mom, and that's all kinds of uncomfortable. He popped in between the election and my hopes. In other words, he took my place as king. Now he's tried to murder me. It's time for me to finally take my sword and kill the guy! Maybe. And Horatio's like, yeah, you better hurry up and do that because it won't be too long before England sends us a message and says, hey, we killed Rosencrantz and Guildenstern for you, and Claudius realizes that you did the whole switcheroo with the letter thing. And Hamlet says, it will be short. The interim is mine. Yeah, it won't be long till we get the letter from England, but at least I've got the meanwhile. And Hamlet's sure to use his time wisely, as he always does. And then he says, I'm sorry I kind of went off on Laertes at the funeral. It was just, the way he was acting, it was so annoying. Jumping in the grave with his sister, you know? Enter Osric, who is a servant who just has this part here. And Osric is here to announce the bet between Claudius and Laertes as to who can win in a sword fight. Who's the better sword fighter? Laertes or Hamlet? You know, it's the whole trap about to be sprung. And Osric is, you know, comic relief. He is the kind of person who likes to have his own particular dress code. Instead of wearing his hat as he's supposed to, he keeps taking it off and holding it in his hands, and Hamlet keeps mocking him and spinning him around. In any case, Hamlet says, I'll do it. I'll do a sword fight match with Laertes to see who's the better swordsman. Sir, I will walk here in the hall, and if it please his majesty, it is the breathing time of day with me. Let the foals be brought, the gentleman willing, and the king hold his purpose. I will win for him if I can. If not, I will gain nothing but my shame and the odd hits. And he also receives a message that the queen wants him to apologize to Laertes before they do the match. And Hamlet says, she well instructs me. He was, after all, feeling a little guilty about his actions at the funeral. And Hamlet and Horatio have a brief speech, which I do want to carefully note. Hamlet says he's been in practice, and so he has a good chance against Laertes, but that's not really the point. But thou wouldst not think how ill all's here about my heart, but it is no matter. Hamlet says, I don't feel good about this, but don't worry about it. And he at first tries to brush it off, but Horatio says, if your mind dislike anything, obey it. I will forestall their repair hither, and say you are not fit. Horatio says, I can make an excuse for you. We can halt this thing right here if you're not feeling good about it. And Hamlet says a really important speech here that I want to emphasize. Not a whit. We defy augury. There's a special providence in the fall of a sparrow. If it be now, 'tis not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is all. Since no man has aught of what he leaves, what is it to leave betimes? Let be. This is the strongest speech of acceptance of death that Hamlet says in the whole thing. Now, Hamlet has been ready to die at any point because of his depression, but here he recognizes that death is something that's inevitable, and it's something that must be accepted whenever it comes. He says, we defy augury. So we can't worry about omens and about foreshadowings and things like that. We have to simply accept what is. If death is ready for me right now, what else can I do? If it's in the future, then I have the now. Let be. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. Speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Enter everyone. Sometimes this is seen as a break of scene, or sometimes everyone just comes in and the match begins. And so begins the final conflict between Hamlet, Claudius, Laertes, Gertrude, everybody. And it starts with Hamlet apologizing to Laertes. Give me your pardon, sir. I have done you wrong, but pardon it as you are a gentleman. This presence knows, and you must needs have heard, how I am punished with sore distraction. What I have done, that might your nature, honor, and exception roughly awake, I here proclaim was madness. Was it Hamlet wrong, Laertes? Never Hamlet. If Hamlet from himself be ta'en away, and when he's not himself does wrong Laertes, then Hamlet does it not. Hamlet denies it. Who does it then? His madness. If it be so, Hamlet is of the faction that is wronged, his madness is poor Hamlet's enemy. Sir, in this audience, let my disclaiming from the purposed evil free me so far in your most generous thoughts, that I have shot my arrow o'er the house and hurt my brother. I'm really sorry I was awful to you, but it wasn't me, it was the madman inside of me. Laertes sort of accepts his apology, but also says that there's still wrong been done between the two of them. But till that can be fixed, I do receive your offered love like love, and will not wrong it. They get ready to play, they select their swords, and Laertes says, oh, I don't like my sword, I want that one over there, pointing at the poisoned blade. They get ready, and the fight begins. The king begins, as they set up ready to attack each other, the king says, set me the stoups of wine upon that table. If Hamlet give the first or second hit, or quit in answer of the third exchange, let all the battlements their ordnance fire. The king shall drink to Hamlet's better breath, and in the cup an union shall he throw, richer than that which 4 successive kings in Denmark's crown have worn. Give me the cups, and let the kettle to the trumpet spink, the trumpet to the cannoneer without, the cannons to the heaven to earth. Now the king drinks to Hamlet. Come begin. And so he acts like he's cheering Hamlet on and says, I'll throw you in this really fancy pearl into your cup and give it to you if you get a good hit in, because that's how much on your side I am. Obviously, this is the poisoned pearl that we heard of earlier. He's going to drop poison in Hamlet's cup. And they begin. Clash, clash, clash. Ting, 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 stab! And Hamlet hits Laertes with the sword. Of course, it's practice, and the blades are not sharpened, except for Laertes. The king, since Hamlet has made the first hit, says, here's to you, and takes a drink, and then he puts the pearl inside and says, here, drink this. Give him the cup. And instead of drinking the poison, Hamlet says, no, not yet. I'm going to keep fighting. One more round. So Claudius awkwardly puts the poison cup back on the table. They fight again, and again Hamlet hits Laertes. Gertrude is so proud of her son, she takes her handkerchief and dabs his forehead. And then, to celebrate his success, she reaches for the table and grabs the wine that was intended for Hamlet. Now what is Claudius gonna do? Is he gonna say, no, Gertrude, please don't drink that, that's poisoned, it's for your son? Well, he can't do that without admitting his own guilt. But he does say, Gertrude, do not drink. And the queen says, I will, my lord, I pray you pardon me. So for once she actually refuses to do what he says and does the opposite, and takes a big swig. The king doesn't want to say anything about it, but he also has just watched Gertrude be poisoned by himself on accident. So he just sits there and pretends like nothing's happening. Hamlet still doesn't want to drink, and so he continues on. Laertes goes up to the king and says, I'll go ahead and hit him now. I'll go ahead and poison him, and yet I feel really bad. Because Laertes has also seen how Gertrude has just poisoned herself, and he's beginning to feel this whole cloak and dagger thing is not working out very well. He wasn't made to be an underhanded spy. They attack each other again, and both of them are holding off the other. Neither Hamlet nor Laertes get in a hit, and finally, Laertes jumps in, scuffles, and slices Hamlet's arm. In the scuffle, Hamlet grabs the sword away from Laertes and stabs him as well. They've both been stuck by poison. In the middle of this, the queen collapses. Horatio runs to check on Hamlet, and Osric runs to check on Laertes, and Laertes says, oh, I am sprung by my own trap. And Laertes says, I am justly killed with mine own treachery. He's finally feeling the guilt of all of this trickery and treachery, and he realizes that he is going to die now. Hamlet, though, is concerned about the queen because she's just collapsed. And the king, the jerk, says she swoons to see them bleed. She's just had a little fainting spell. But the queen manages to cough out before she dies. No, the drink is poisoned! Hamlet sees that someone has just murdered his mother, and so he demands that the doors be locked until they can investigate and figure out who, as if it weren't already obvious. But Laertes goes ahead and collapses on the floor and confesses to Hamlet. It is here, Hamlet. Hamlet, thou art slain. No medicine in the world can do thee good. In thee there is not half an hour of life. The treacherous instrument is in thy hand, unbaited and envenomed. The foul practice has turned itself on me. Lo, here I lie, never to rise again. Thy mother's poisoned. I can no more. The king's to blame. So Hamlet has 30 minutes left to live, max. And he realizes that the sword he's holding is poisoned and has just poisoned him. And also that his mother has just drank poison. All thanks to King Claudius. And so, Hamlet finally gets his revenge. He grabs the poison sword and stabs Claudius, and then he grabs the poison cup and forces it down Claudius's throat. Double kill! Here, thou incestuous, murderous, damned Dane, drink of this poison. Is thy union here? Follow my mother! Laertes, as he's dying, says, he is justly served. It is a poison tempered by himself. Exchange forgiveness with me, noble Hamlet. Mine and thy father's death come not upon thee, nor thine on me. Let's all forgive each other as we die. And as Laertes flops over dead on the floor, Hamlet also forgives him. Heaven make thee free of it. I follow thee. I am dead, Horatio. Wretched queen, adieu. You that look pale and tremble at this chance, that are but mutes or audiences to this act, had I but time, as this fell Sergeant Death is strict in his arrest. Oh, I could tell you, but let it be. Horatio, I am dead. Thou livest. Report me and my cause aright to the unsatisfied. The last thing that Hamlet wants is an explanation to be given, because most of the people in the room were just showing up thinking they were going to watch a little fencing match, and all of a sudden, bloodbath! Everyone's being stabbed and poisoned and falling over dead. You can imagine how awkward that is for everyone. And so Hamlet asks Horatio, please tell everybody what's going on. Explain to them all what was happening. But Horatio's like, nuh-uh, I'm gonna die too, let me drink some poison as well! And Hamlet knocks it out of his hand and says, give me the cup, let go, by heaven I'll have it. Good Horatio, what a wounded name. Things standing thus unknown shall live behind me. If thou didst ever hold me in thy heart, absent thee from felicity a while, and in this harsh world draw thy breath in pain to tell my story. I know you'd rather die and would be so happy to die, but, you know, hang on to this painful world long enough at least to tell my story so people will know why all this happened. And they hear gunfire in the background. Oh, hey, Fortinbrah's finally invading! Not that he had much to stand up against in the first place, but he's gonna walk in to find the whole royal family dead on the floor. And as Hamlet's dying, he says, I cannot live to hear the news from England, but I do prophesy the election lights on Fortinbrah. He has my dying voice. Upvote Fortinbrah, because he's gonna rule now. Why not? Why not give it to Fortinbrah? I mean, that guy at least had some gumption. And Hamlet falls on the floor and dies. The rest is silence. And Horatio says the famous line, Good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels sing thee to thy rest. And enter Fortinbrah, who, again, looks around and sees all the dead bodies and is like, what? Okay, so I thought I was invading, but apparently I'm just, yeah. And in walks the ambassador from England, is like, good news from England! Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead! Ba-dum-bum-tsh. And Horatio's like, okay, it's gonna be a long story, everybody. Let me sit down and explain. So shall you hear of carnal, bloody, and unnatural acts, of accidental judgments, casual slaughters, of deaths put on by cunning and forced cause, and in this upshot, purposes mistook, fallen on their inventors' heads. All this I can truly deliver. And so Fortinbrah is ready to hear Horatio's story, but as they prepare to hear the whole story of Hamlet, Fortinbrah orders that Hamlet be like a soldier born from the stage. For he was likely, had he been put on, to have proved most royally. And for his passage, the soldier's music and the rights of war speak loudly for him. Take up the bodies. Such a sight as this becomes the field, but here shows much amiss. Go bid the soldiers shoot. And so Hamlet gets a soldier's burial for, I don't know, stalling for 5 acts and then finally doing what he needed to do in the last 30 seconds of life. Much could be said about the inaction of this play, the failure of the characters to act again and again and again and again and again. And Hamlet, who finally does act and finally does the thing he's been intending to do this whole time, only does it when he realizes he has mere minutes to live. And only after Clonigus has caused so much grief and so much pain and so much suffering. Ah, there are lessons to be learned. This play is so rich. It deals with grief and depression. It deals with the issues of feeling the weight and guilt of something that you know you should do but you don't want to do. It deals with procrastination. It deals with angst and human sorrow. It deals with all the things that happen when you try to solve your problems in the most twisted and convoluted and underhanded ways. It's such a fun play. Thanks for exploring it with me and going through these 5 acts. You can click to subscribe or to watch another Shakespeare video I've got up here. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Can I get you
No, thanks.
water?
This one video has taken me 3 days to get done because of my very crushed and crunched schedule. And so I've been wearing the same shirt and tie for 3 days. So it looks like it all was one shoot.